to You're Doing It Wrong with Coach PJ. Today I'm going to show you a version of the lateral mini band walk. This is another exercise that's butchered all the time, and there's some very simple little details that change this exercise significantly. So the way that a lot of people do this exercise, if they don't know how to do it right, you can do a mini band on your knees or mini band on the ankles, and that'll change it a little bit. But the way you see this exercise being performed often is mini band on the knees, and Chase is just going to do a couple steps each way here, and he'll show how most people do it wrong. So you notice he's got no control of his knees here. His knees are getting caved in. Step back towards me. And then even if he goes knees out, so spread your knees apart. This is one of the really common ways, because some people know that we're trying to keep the knees spread apart. So they keep the knees spread apart, but they pay no attention to the foot and ankle position. That's going to be really ineffective here, because we're trying to train the muscles that abduct and externally rotate the hips. So we're trying to isolate the glute and glute medius. So if Chase's foot position changes, it's going to significantly change the muscles that are doing the work. Number one, if the band is pulling his knees in, now we're not getting the external rotation of the hip. We're putting him in this valgus collapsed knee position. That's just a really ineffective way to train the lower body in general. It's a bad position to be in. So we're not getting anything out of this position. So he needs to be cueing himself to drive his knees apart into the band. So we're getting that external rotation at the hips, which is going to be handled by the glutes. The glutes are an external rotator of the hips. So we're keeping that. So that's one of the major benefits. But people who focus on that, they still drive the band apart, but they forget foot position. So you noticed before, turn your feet out, he had his feet turned out. And this happens a lot, especially when they have the band on the ankles. The feet start to turn out as they do these band walks. The difference here, if his foot turns out, he's now externally rotated his hip, and now when he goes to step, instead of abducting at the hip and working the glute medius to abduct that hip, he's now turned his foot, so the hip flexors are what's going to take over. These are much stronger, way overactive, and they're going to end up doing all the work. So instead of isolating the smaller muscle groups that are really weak here, we end up just using the hip flexors to do all the work. So you see people do this stuff all the time. Forward and backward band walks, they're all very similar. They use way too much of the hip flexors, and they don't even isolate the muscles that they're trying to activate. So a more effective way to perform this exercise would be down in a quarter squat position. Chase is already spreading his knees apart into the band, and then he's going to keep his toes pointed straight forward, and I like to cue him to step out with his heels. So when he goes to step out, he's going to push his heel out. Go ahead and step. There we go. So he's taking small 6-inch steps here, one step and then the other. He's keeping his body in a nice straight line, so there's no teetering side to side. He's keeping his knees spread wide. He's paying attention to the back knee too. So as he steps with his right leg, he's not allowing this knee to collapse. So he's working both sides to drive against the band. Go ahead, a couple steps back. But really important, he's keeping his toes pointed straight, so he's driving his heels out. So if he had, you can relax. If he had the band on his ankles, the band is going to try to pull my heels in and my toes out. So I have to focus every step on turning my toes in and stepping out with my heel so that the right muscles are abducting the hip and doing the work, because that's what I'm trying to isolate anyway.